Coach, we want to transition now into a fun segment we do here on the show called Start, Sub, or Sit. And so we'll give you 3 basketball topics and then ask you to start one, sub one, and sit one. So, Coach, if you're ready, we can dive into this segment here.
I'm ready.
Okay. Coach, we haven't talked about the defensive side of the ball too much yet, so we're going to start with a defensive question for you. And this theme is just how you can apply pressure defensively. So start, sub, or sit, good ball pressure, just pressure on the ball, lane pressure, making it difficult for reversals or passes, or through traps, say either a ball screen trap or trapping in the post, being able to systematically trap and put pressure on a team. So start, sub, or sit, 3 different ways to apply defensive pressure.
Yeah, there's no right answer on this one because all of them obviously,
Yeah.
Whether you're gap oriented and you're not getting in there, or if you're Florida State oriented and you're causing a lot of turnovers. So obviously people do this differently. For me, I think it's very personnel based, and I would sit lane pressure. Okay. Simply because I think ball pressure is so important that if you're just letting, the analogy that I always use is if we're just going to let Tom Brady sit in the pocket and he's going to be able to throw wherever he wants, we are in trouble. And if they're just going to be able to move this ball however it is they want to see fit, they're going to get to execute whatever it is they want to execute. Now, you have to be able to guard the penetration. And so whether that be rotation or traps, I would sit lane pressure. I would start ball pressure, and then I would sub the trapping.
Okay. Coach, my follow-up is with your start with the ball pressure and against a great player, let's say a great guard who just has the ability to kind of get anywhere that they want on the floor. Do you think about still trying to apply great pressure, knowing that they can probably, get downhill and cause rotations, or think more about ways to maybe confuse or disorient a great guard on the perimeter?
Yeah, I think there are a number of people in Europe who are doing wonderful things with guys on the ball. And what you see is let's say a guy's on the ball in a spread pick and roll situation. You're seeing people go trap from the 2 side, rotate up from the corner, and then making you go to the 1 side to try to throw to that weak side corner. And so I think when you watch that happen in Europe, taking a ball out of somebody's hands, because you never want your best player, their best player, to just go off and sit back. Now, some people may approach it like we're just not going to let the others go off. And I was a part of a game one time where Kansas State had Michael Beasley, and I forget the other gentleman's name, but they scored 85 points. And I think Michael had 45. The other guy had like 38. And so they ended up scoring 83 of the 85. And we ended up winning. And we were just like, man, them 2 dudes went off, and we were fortunate. And so I think it's different. I will tell you that on game winners or last 2 minutes of the game, I would not want the best. I would want to make somebody else try to make a play. And so I think obviously with the ebbs and flows during a game that you kind of have to think through it. I will tell you that the last 2 minutes, I don't want their best player to have the opportunity, and you sit there and say, crap, we let their very best player get the best look. Now, how do you make sure you don't leave somebody else wide open and get that opportunity? And I do think that there's challenges that we all have to think through as we go through. And that's why I think game plans are probably a lot different game to game, where you're trying not to get out of your framework, but you are trying to discuss what's going to put your players in the best position.
Coach, if I could, because to follow up, you've got one of those guards that is really crafty in a pick and roll, hard for anybody to keep him in front of. So how do you think, knowing that maybe in late game situations, teams might try to take the ball out of his hands from the offensive side, how do you look at trying to make sure he's still able to maybe make a play and not, just get doubled and have to give it up?
Yeah, I think you have to give those good players options and just tell them, hey, here's the scenario. Here is your pass option. Here is your to the rim option. And then here is your shot option. And so I stole this from Coach Stotts for college. I think they called the game 90 to 90. We call it 65-65. If our guys are scoring 90 points a game, we're in trouble. So what we do is we play 65-65 and 5-on-5. And when the clock gets to 70, so let's say it's 68-68, one team goes ahead, now it's 70-68. Then we put 2 minutes on the clock and we run it down. So what happens is instead of trying to figure out every little scenario that occurs during the course of a game and you trying to mimic it, hey, what do we do when we're down 8 seconds to go? It's so random. And our guys enjoy playing, but we can talk through, they understand what has to occur if this amount of time, how many possessions are we down? And I think you're forcing them to think. And so I would tell you probably 2 to 3 times a week, we usually do a best 3 out of 5, 65-65. How do you put your guys in scenarios that are real world? I mean, if you've ever tried to script this stuff, all right, here, guys, is you huddle with them. You talk to them for like 5 minutes. Like, all right, guys, we're down 8. Or we're down 8 seconds to go. We're down 2. We got to go the length of the court. Coach, are you putting somebody over the ball or not over the ball? Nobody's over the ball. And so you're just trying to draw up all these scenarios and it takes you 5 minutes. The other coach is figuring out, well, our defense is based on where your alignment is. And so I've tried to get some of the thinking out of that by playing what Terry Stotts did in Portland. And so for me, thinking through that whole process, I want to give our players options. What is your pass option? What is your rim option? What is your shot option? And hopefully we've done it enough to where they understand it.
Sure.
Coach, when you say drive, pass, and shoot options, is that you designing a play and a timeout for them? Or is that more playing off your concepts and the spacing options that they know within that where those options will be?
Yeah. So going back to Coach Obradovic, I would ask Epe, I said, Epe, hey, tell me. And he said, some of the practice, he would just go over there and he said, Coach Mills, you have to understand he's a genius. And he would go over there and he would draw up a play and we'd have to go run it. And God forbid you do not run it right. And then you would come back over and he'd draw up a play. And I was like, just on the fly, stuff you've never done before. He said, absolutely. And so for me, I don't think it works as well with non-pro players. Yeah. So for us, like our guys know, like, hey, length of the court. For us, it's kind of, is there 6 seconds or not 6 seconds on the clock? Because those are 2 different plays. And then you have, hey, what happens if there's a second on the clock? Probably anything under 3. You have those plays. So for us, we try to have 2 in our pocket. For those, we have two under 3. We have 2 between 3 and 6, and then we have 2 above. And then we have that play where, hey, there's 9 seconds. We have a sideline OB we'd like to run. Obviously, we don't get to advance the ball. How do we get the ball to half court and call timeout? I think Wisconsin used to dribble up like if a score's tied and would like fake a timeout, right. And they would like dribble over to the coach right after half court. And then that dude and the other 4 just lagging behind like there is going to be a timeout. And then that dude would just turn the corner and go get a layup. I love that one. We've never had an opportunity to execute it, but we've got that one in our back pocket if that one ever occurred. But I think your guys have to know. I don't think we could be Fenerbahce when they're winning EuroLeague titles and just, hey, let's draw up a play. Let's see if you guys can execute it. We don't have those kind of guys. So we're very scripted in what we do, and they understand what we do, hopefully. And our guys, if you saw our Sweet 16 game, I mean, they looked at the time on the clock. They immediately knew when our timeout was. Like, when do we call timeouts? There's a certain time on the clock. And then here's what we're doing. And so that none of that was anything new to those guys, because I don't know if young men who've never been in that position can actually handle that environment and pressure at that time.
Oh, okay.
And I don't want to bet if they can or not.
Right.
Okay, Coach. Our next start, sub, sit for you is pick and pop locations. So start, sub, or sit. Pick and pop on the side pick and roll empty corner, so popping to the empty corner. A short angle screen popping to then the two-man side, or a top ball screen popping to the single side or a man in the corner.
Yeah. Man, we have all of those in our arsenal, and I love all of them because, hey, what happens when we pop to a one side, right? What happens when we pop to a two side? I think that super aggressive teams, right, and you're running empty pick and roll. So, man, you're coming off an outer third pick and roll, and they are going to trap or they're going to hard hedge, and then being able to throw back to an empty off of a pop. That recovery obviously is so much longer and so much further in how. But I'll say all of this. I will sit the two side simply because there's more traffic over there.
Okay.
If you're a really aggressive team and you go to the two side and you can pop back to the single and you put that guy in a weak side 2-on-1, depending on how aggressive you are, I would tell you that one I would sub that one, and then I would start the empty side pick and roll. But I think all of that comes back to what is their coverage. If they are in a drop coverage, I would tell you that I'm probably going to attack a single, simply because I'm giving that ball handler more room either to snake it back, to go to his middle game. I know people are anti-middle game. I used to spend my summers with Coach Majerus, and he would often talk about that we don't want to lose the advantage that we've created off the switch. So if you shoot a long shot, point guard, after the big is on you, those are going to be long rebounds, and we've eliminated our offensive rebound opportunity with the little and the big. If you get to the rim, that dude is good enough to block your shot or to cause a problem. So you have to have a middle game in order to pull up so that we can have, hey, this big is on the run to the rim with a little on him. Now we've got an offensive rebound advantage on the run. And so I would tell you that if you're in drop, you may attack the single probably more than you would the double. But I think all of those obviously depend on the coverage.
Coach, does any of it change if you're going to pop a non-shooting big with the intention of getting maybe to a second side action?
No, I actually think that's a really good thing, right? That you can pop a non-shooting big, because let's say they go and put two on the ball. And let's say you went to the one side. So you turn around, you pop that guy, depending on what you're doing with the two side. In my mind, there's only three things you can do. You can cut the 45, you can flare from the corner. The corner guy can flare and then he can slip, and you can get that 45 off the flare. And then the other thing is you can cut the corner and then you can slide the 45. So one of those three, I think, is probably what teams are going to do. So I would tell you that whatever it is that you're doing on the two side, I think that the recovery, if you swing it with that pop off the empty and you go and then run it into a ball screen, I think that the recovery, however it is you decided to manipulate that two side, I think that recovery is so hard. And when you're asking that big to run from outer third to other side outer, second side outer third, good luck, because whatever you're not going to be able to ice it, because I don't think that dude can go over there to ice it. So if you're an outer third ice team, if you just swing that ball, I don't think you're going to be able to ice that. I mean, maybe guys are good enough too, but I would tell you that non-shooting bigs in that regard have a wonderful advantage, because now they get head of steam. Your ball handler gets head of steam if you can connect on the roll, and then the screener gets head of steam to the rim off of an empty.
Coach, on that second side with the non-shooting big, I don't know how much you're thinking about the difference between passing it and sprinting into another on ball versus dribble handoff with a little pitch.
Yeah.
Or like the communication between which type of action you're going to swing it and play through on that second side.
Yeah. So was at a Florida clinic a few years back and listened to Steve Clifford kind of talk about this. And he talked about just how hard it is to guard that flip.
Yeah.
Right. I think the DHO to some degree, especially if you're guarding a non-shooter, probably can't handle either. I mean, that's probably not what they're gifted at. So you're always, hey, dribble at the defender. Yeah, good luck. That dude's not good enough to dribble at the defender. And so you're asking him, he doesn't even know where the defender is. All he does is see his guy. And so how do I get the ball to my guy? That's all I see. So now, if you're ultra aggressive, I don't think you can flip it. But I will tell you that if you could flip it and then run it into, you give that big a time to maybe lower that screen if he's a non-shooter. Mm-hmm. And try not to get an illegal, but you do have a little bit of wiggle room. I mean, what happens collegiately is a lot of these people are just sprinting under DHOs. And so if you're just sprinting under a DHO, you've probably eliminated your advantage. Unless that dude can really shoot, right? But how often can people really shoot off handoffs? It's really hard to do. And so if you could flip it, when I say flip it, I mean throw it out there to him, toss it to him, and then run it. That's better. Or just grab it and swing it. If you're good enough, what Villanova calls a second cut, hey, look, they're denying your first one. Can you make a second one? Right? Bigs can't pass. But if that big hasn't recovered, here's your time to not have anybody in front of you to possibly hit a guy on a second cut. And so I think you're just talking with your guys through those scenarios. But I think DHO, you basically eliminate your options.
Coach, our last start, sub, or sit for you. You guys led the nation last year in 3-pointers made per game. And you guys play with great pace and get the ball out and play with that great pace. So this is 3 things that are tough to teach when it comes to shooting 3-pointers in transition. Okay. So you'll start what is the most difficult in your mind to teach when teaching to play this way. So start, sub, or sit, teaching the correct transitions.
You want me to give you the 3 options that I already know? I don't even know what you're going to say, but I can tell you the hardest ones, but go ahead.
Well, maybe you can.
We'll see what you come up with.
Let's see how good we are. Okay. And then if yours are better, we'll just take yours. So the spacing, sprinting to the correct spacing in transition, shot selection, or third we had is teaching and getting reps on the correct rhythm and balance to shoot a transition 3.
Yeah. Which of those is most important? Tell me the second one again.
Shot selection.
Yeah. I would tell you, I would sit that one. If you're going to shoot them in transition, shoot it. There's probably not a space on the floor unless you're too deep, obviously. I would sit that one. I don't want our guys thinking about it too much. The sub, I would tell you that getting shot ready, I would tell you that what's most important is probably sprinting. And that's easier said than done, but I think you could get a lot done if you could get guys to sprint to the corners. I mean, we're probably no different than anybody else. And you have your corners taped off on where they should be. But I will tell you from an accountability standpoint, that doesn't mean 6 inches above that box. It doesn't mean 2 inches above that box. It means below that box. Now, I will tell you Kirk Goldsberry does a good job of making much of information on the NBA. If you've ever looked at right corner threes in the NBA versus left corner threes, Bogdan Bogdanovic led the league in right corner threes at 46%. On that left side, I forget who, but it was 55%. It's a 9% difference. And they were the best in the NBA. And if you think about it for right-hand shooters, well, on the right corner, that's a little bit of a tougher angle, because if you get too deep, your angle may be behind the backboard. Whereas if you look at the left side, you, for most part, can't get behind the backboard as a right-hand shooter. So these two right-handed shooters it's a 9 percentage point difference, a 1.65 points per possession on the left. And then on the other side, you're 1.42, right? So you're sitting there, or 1.38. So you're sitting there going through it, and you're like, man, I'd score 17 more points if I just shoot left-handed, left corner threes. So I do think you have to teach your kids spacing right-handed versus left-handed. Go look at Julius Randle's numbers in the NBA. I think it's like a 22% difference between the left corner. He's much lower than the right corner, but he's a lefty. And so I think we have to kind of talk through, hey, what does sprinting to the corner mean? Like, you don't want to get too deep, but you do have to be able to space the court accordingly. And so I think that getting guys to sprint and understanding where their space should be is a lot easier said than done. And so I think that's very important.
Coach, you mentioned you had the three most important things.
Yeah.
What were those different than what we
I would
you?
tell you the one that I believe is hardest is where you give the guy the ball too early and then they dribble into it. Like, I think that's a really difficult shot. And I'm talking one dribble into it. So what you see sometimes when guys shoot transition threes at the college level for us is you gave it to him too early and he dribbles in. The other one, obviously, is when they shoot it too deep.
Yeah.
And you just going, and, I tell our players, if I were to give you $1 million to make a shot, all right, where are you shooting from? Well, I bet you're shooting a layup or a dunk. You're not going to shoot it from half court. So if they're going to give us guys, we have NBA lines on our courts. When we practice in our practice facility, they're down. But that's not for you to do it while we're playing. Unless you can make them. We track every last one of their shots. So if you are going to shoot a three, and there's 4 kind of threes that we encourage because we don't want them to overthink. But if you shoot an NBA or a one dribble one, I'm usually on the ball handler. And then after I get on the ball handler, I'm usually on that guy, because he needs to know that that's not a three that we want, because it's just such a low efficient shot.
Okay.
Coach, what are you telling the ball handler in that transition? Would you prefer he dribbles more, or when are you telling him to either pass here or don't? What's your preference?
Yeah. We've been very fortunate. 2 years ago, we were second in the country at not turning it over. This past year, we were 16th in the country at not turning it over. But we've also been top 50 in tempo. And so we've been able to play fast and not turn it over. What I try to tell our point guards is I don't want the ball changing hands much in transition, because that's where turnovers occur. And so if we are going to pass the ball ahead, we're trying to do it before half court. Once that thing crosses half court, we don't need to change a whole lot of hands in that first 7 seconds. Maybe 1, maybe 2, but I can promise you we're not trying to do 3. And so we're just trying to space, whether it be, let's just say both slots, both corners. And then we're trying to keep it really simple. Okay, what if the slot runs it into a drag? What if the big comes down and he sees his guys at the rim, and then we jump right into an RPO, a roll pop option? What happens if we do that? All right, do the guys now know 2 side, 1 side? Are you familiar with our cutting and our spacing? And it differs from game to game based on what that looks like. So I say all of that is when we're trying to get these threes in transition, it's probably going to happen because of a penetrating pitch or off a ball screen. Let's not overcomplicate it more than that. We rarely get pitch ahead threes. If we get pitch aheads, and then what we would call a replay, throw it to him, he throws it back. If we get pitch ahead threes, it's probably going to be because we pitched it ahead, drove it, got a paint touch, and then threw it out to somebody.
Coach, I wonder that with your concept of keeping the ball in your point guard's hands in transition, especially if they get past half court, would that change, or has it changed at all in your career as opposed to, so since you have such a great guard right now in A. Smith and you want him to create an advantage because he can on his own, if you didn't have quite the same caliber guard, would you want the ball moving a little more earlier in the transition? Or has that always been your staple of less passes in transition?
Yeah, I mean, Max A. Smith played off the ball his freshman year, was second in the threes behind some guy named Anthony Edwards. I think it was a first pick in the NBA draft or something. And Max was right behind him, but Max played off the ball. And that year we were second in the country at not turning it over. And for us, we do want to change sides, right? If you cross half court, you don't want to keep the ball on the same side. So whatever that looks like, you could pitch it behind to that 4-man coming down and let him change sides with it. You could just run traffic with the 4 to 5. You could get into an RPO. So whatever it looks like, we do want to change sides. I'm not big on changing hands. I'm big on changing hands if it's a dead ball. So you're running a set, you're running some action, then we want to change hands. In transition, I just think the more it's so hard for players to make passes on the run. It's hard enough for them to make passes standing still. Right. Hey guys, throw to the outside hand, put something on it. Don't you see he's overplayed? That dude's got to be the second cut. You get your guys, hey, I'm not open. They just stand up there dancing. And you're just like, okay, you're confusing me. You're confusing the passer. This stuff where you're just over here stutter stepping the whole time. I'm confused. So make one cut and then make and you're done. Like we're finished with you. So we're not doing. So what happens is you're asking guys to make all these passes on the run. And I don't know that they can do it in the half court making reads. So I don't want to put them in a whole lot of full court opportunities. So in that regard, we're trying not to get the ball to change hands much. Like I said, at the most 2. And then if we don't get anything, we're probably going into some action that we're very familiar with. And then after a dead ball, you want the ball to change hands a lot. Coaches I think every coach yells, move it, and everybody stole Pops in San Antonio Spurs 0.5. I'm like, let me tell y'all something. My guys can't make a decision in 0.5 seconds. If you ask them to go order on a menu, I mean, we go to Chick-fil-A, my guys, same menu every freaking day. And you're struggling here. All right. You've been here 100 times and you're over here debating in your head. You can't. I expect you to make a basketball decision that quick. Nah, that ain't happening. So we do want you to move it, but we're not putting half a second on you when you can't decide what you're ordering at Chick-fil-A.
Coach, my last follow-up, and it's a little bit of a tangent, but you mentioned that your cutting around the pick and roll will change game to game. And we talked a little bit about the 45 cut, the flare, or the baseline cut and the drift. Mm-hmm. How are you changing those game to game, or are those reads out of your players?
Yeah. So let's say let's say we are in a spread pick and roll and you have a 1-5 pick and roll and the 4 is in the weak side 45. Well, let's say their 4 is not very mobile, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's back. So you cutting the 45 probably isn't going to do you any good. Obviously, if he's pressuring, cutting that 45 may be good. So let's say that forward could really shoot and we know that they're in. So we may flare it, right? And you may not flare it too much, because your flare too much is just going to result in a switch with that guard. And so it's almost like, can that screener pop it? Like just go directly behind the screen. So not necessarily, you don't even have to move. We're just going to get that corner guy to go in and set a screen. All right. And you're just staying where you're at that 45. And then we're going to play out of that. Now, if we can get you to be in a long closeout on an empty side and let our 4-man, hey, you're going to go make a play. Now, if they switch it, obviously, now we've got our faster guy, right, on with our least mobile guy. Yeah. And so then, hey, we've got to swing it. But now we've got an offensive rebound advantage. So we're just going to run you to the rim, 4-man. You're going to be on the porch. And then we are trying to put their least mobile big in a situation. So you'll know that going into a game. And so you're probably drilling it all week in anticipation of this occurring.
Okay. Well, Coach, you're off the start sub sit hot seat. Thanks for going through that with us. That was a lot of fun.